someone who's autistic simply has a different central nervous system. And that is a very different way of looking at autism than the medical pathology model that says basically autism or individuals or children who are autistic are somehow deficient.
So a lot of parents will have heard about this idea called neurodiversity, but not really have an idea of what it is. What is it?
Well, I will say that as I am continuing to learn. Now, I've been at this for a lot of years. I've been supporting autistic children and their families for many years in the U.S. And I continue to learn about this idea of neurodiversity and what it means. And the way I think about it very simply is that human beings have very different central nervous systems, right? The idea, I mean, we sort of understand this about human beings in general, that we are incredibly diverse in terms of what we look like, the sort of, ethnically, culturally, in terms of what the feet, not only the sort of the features, skin colors, eye, hair, all of the incredible diversity that represents humanity. But we also, in different corners of the world, have evolved different ways of communicating and being together, and different value systems, different belief systems, right? There's incredible diversity. And we know this when we look around sort of the world. And absolutely the same is true when we think about this whole spectrum of humanity in terms of either neurotypical or neurodiverse individuals. So for example, it seems like, and we're still learning about this, but it seems like the majority of human beings, at this point at least, that we can figure out on the planet, are what we would call neurotypical, right? Meaning our brains, body, central nervous systems are wired in such a way that allow us to communicate in particular ways and interact in particular ways and develop in particular ways. And I think what the neurodiversity movement is saying is our understanding of that is very limited. And what we have to appreciate is that that every child is born with a unique central nervous system, brain, biology, body, etc., and that neurodiversity is so important because it sees that as actually just a natural part of human expression. That someone who's autistic simply has a different central nervous system. And that is a very different way of looking at autism than the medical pathology model that says basically autism or individuals or children who are autistic are somehow deficient and need to be fixed or cured or trained essentially to be neurotypical.
Yeah, and I think it's a really simple idea, isn't it? And so powerful. Just that in the same way as in nature you have biodiversity, within a species you can have neurodiversity, just a different way of being, a different neurology between people, a different way of thinking. Such a simple idea, but it's so powerful because it just takes that focus away from autism is a deviation from a norm that everybody should aspire to autism is one of the many neurological types. It's one of the smaller ones. It's one that may have some enormous and unique qualities to bring, just as neurotypical people have enormous and unique qualities. Autistic people will have amazing and unique qualities as well. And it's about seeing the world as this more collaborative place where we make use of each other's gifts, rather than a place where we take one of these types that happens to be the majority and impose it on everybody else.
Exactly, Guy. And I think that's what growing numbers, again, and you know, when I say growing numbers, I mean, you know, the vocal community of autistic adults that I continue to learn from, have continued to send that message loud and clear that this is not about you know, autistic individuals are not in any way imperfect versions of being human. And I think Barry Prezant, who's a, you know, a colleague and who developed a particular approach together with some colleagues called the SERTS model in the United States, and he's a researcher and a speech and language pathologist, and he's really been on the cutting edge, I think, of being a neurotypical professional trying to really understand and support autistic people and their families for many years. And he wrote a wonderful book called Uniquely Human that really challenges the perspective that somehow there's something that needs to be fixed about autistic people. He actually flips it, and this is again what I'm learning to do as a neurotypical professional, and says, you know, what do I need to learn about how to be more sensitive, more tuned into the unique or the perhaps different ways that autistic people may be communicating and interacting or moving through the world, so that the responsibility is not, as it always has been, on the autistic person to have to try to adapt or change or just modify their natural way of communicating to fit me, a neurotypical person. It's absolutely as much, if not more, of my responsibility to really to change, modify, perhaps shift how I may naturally engage or interact with a person who just has a different brain and central nervous system than mine. And it's interesting because, you know, this is difficult for all of us as human beings to do. We tend to like to stay in our comfort zones and interact and communicate with people that are quote unquote like us, that speak the same language, that look similar, that have similar values. And so again, the challenge, I think, for all of us on this planet, especially at this point in time, is to learn how to really be open and flexible, and ultimately really learn constantly how to interact and communicate with human beings who may be very different than we are. And that is what I continue to learn as a neurotypical professional.
And that brings us to what does it mean for parents? How can parents make use of this concept of neurodiversity to support their children?
That's really the most important question, isn't it? Because otherwise it's sort of just an idea or a concept. And I think, you know, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, you know, my work as a neurotypical professional is really to support and encourage, especially neurotypical parents, to learn how to slow down and really pay more and more attention to their children in everyday interactions. and again, sometimes hold back their own ideas or thoughts or initiatives about what they would like their child to do, or about how they would like to interact with their child, excuse me, so that they ultimately can invite and encourage their children to really be who they are, and really bring their initiatives, their ideas, their thoughts, their feelings forward into an interaction with their parents. And again, the reason why this is so hard is because it's the same reason that sometimes really listening to someone else is hard, because then I have to hold back my own ideas or my own thoughts or my own something that I want to say. I have to hold it back to allow room and space and encourage and invite another person to come forth with their own ideas. And you know, essentially that's all I'm doing, Guy. And I think that's the essence of what the neurodiversity movement is asking of neurotypical people. Just learn how to listen more.
And I think it sort of feeds. We had a conversation recently about milestones, parents being concerned about missing milestones. This concept of neurodiversity is also really helpful in terms of letting go of those worries and those concerns, and almost a panic sometimes that my child isn't hitting these milestones. Because if we can understand our child as a part of the great neurodiversity of the world, of the human species, then that doesn't arise. We see them for who they are and for what they can bring, and they have their own milestones, and we follow and celebrate those milestones, whatever they are and whenever they happen.
Absolutely, Guy. And I just want to say this too, because I think this is important for parents to get this message as well, that what we're saying is encouraging, accepting a child really where they are, and tuning in more to their own particular strengths and developmental pathway. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're also not going to seek out opportunities to support a child who may be having some developmental challenges, right? It's not either or. And that's really important to say, because I wouldn't want parents to get the message that what we're saying is don't worry about it at all. Don't seek out any help, or don't seek out any support for your child. If, for example, they're having, you know, difficulty communicating, as we know can be the case, if they're having difficulty just managing everyday life, and, for example, are having really frequent tantrums and meltdowns, and you know, things that can be very concerning and alarming, understandably, for parents. We're not saying ignore those things and just, you know, everything will work out. It can be very important to seek out support when children are having some developmental challenges. What I continue to see, though, and I really want parents to get this message, is that if parents are not learning how to really tune into their child's strengths and really give their child a message that I'm with you, I love you and accept you for who you are, and I'm going to invite you into interaction, communication with me in a way that you can manage and handle right now, and I'm gonna be with you. Even if, for example, I want you to be using more words or whatever it might be, I'm going to meet you where you are right now. When that doesn't happen, and a child's experience is that they are constantly being pushed at a speed or a pace that is too much for them, things can really break down. It's not that we don't want parents to seek support, but really having a balance there is incredibly important.
It's so important, that balance, because it's like, as you say, it's like it doesn't mean that there's no support. If a child is neurodiversity doesn't mean that if a child's constantly distressed and constantly melting down and constantly bursting into rages of anger or whatever, there's no support. But that support is given, ideally, not on the basis of it's an autistic person showing autistic traits who needs to be molded to behave in a less autistic way. It's instead on the basis of this is a human being who's having difficulties, like any human being could have difficulties in any area. Let's see what we can do to support them. It's a totally different approach. And as you rightly say as well, the approach of behaviorally trying to change somebody either in a direction that's not right for them or before they're ready can have the opposite effect. It can actually curtail their ability, you know, might accelerate it for a short time and then put a ceiling on how far they're able to go, and they may even go backwards in the future. I've met autistic adults who feel devastated by having gone through this sort of treatment when they were younger.